Hi, my name is Brad Magnus, and I run an Adobe After Effects user group in East Tennessee. And in a recent meetup, we walked through how to create this effect using After Effects, Mettle's ShapeShifter for the 3D text, and Red Giant's Particular to create the fire, the sparks, and the bouncing sparks. So in the meetup, I did everything pretty slowly so that people could follow along with their laptops if they had them. And it took me about an hour and 15 minutes. I'm going to try to condense all that information down to 20 to 30 minutes. But if you would like to find out more information about 3D text, you could always visit mettle.com/tutorials. And these tutorials by Trevor Coates right here about the Superman logo are really great tutorials, a really great series. It was featured on Tuts Plus, aetutsplus.com. Really digs in deep on how to create really great 3D objects directly in After Effects. And you can always jump over to Red Giant Software and their Getting Started videos to learn more about creating fire, drifting, and bouncing particles. So let's get started. In After Effects, we have a very simple scene set up here. We have a background layer that is just a simple texture I found on the web, turned into a 3D layer and rotated down 90 degrees and moved its position down. We also have 3 lights and a camera. Very simple setup, nothing special, but it gives us a good canvas to get started with. Okay, I also have this on fire text in the scene. And ShapeShifter from Mettle makes it really easy to create great 3-dimensional text in After Effects that reacts to lights and cameras in the scene. So if we pan around this text, you can see that I'm moving just using the camera tool and orbiting around, and you can see that we get really great 3-dimensional text. So we're going to undo that real quick. And if you want more information, definitely check out the tutorials on mettle.com. But I'm going to run through this real quick. I just want to make sure, I want to make this text a little bit more narrow. I think that looks a little better. And I also want to add a displacement map. So displacement maps use a grayscale image, which I have right here, to displace the text to add a little bit of texture to it. So I'm going to add it into the scene and then turn the layer off. We're going to go back to the effects controls, select the text, and we're going to choose the displace layer as the displace map. And if we zoom in, you can see it's already working a little bit, but I'm going to bump the displace height to 2. And that just gives us a little more organic feeling text than what it was before. And it also makes it seem like it would fit more in a scene with a concrete floor. So that is it. That's all I'm going to do with ShapeShifter. But you can pre-compose this text and animate color, and then you can also pre-compose the displace map and animate the displace map, which is what I referred to here in these tutorials. He does both of those things in Trevor Coates does right here, and they're great tutorials. If you're at all interested in learning more about ShapeShifter, that is the place to start. So that's it for the text. The rest of the tutorial, we're going to focus on creating particles. So I'm going to create a new solid, Control Y, make it comp size. This color does not matter, but I'm going to call this layer the fire part. Okay. I'm going to select the layer, come over here and type in PART, and we've got Trapcode Particular. I'm going to double click. So I'm going to leave the center of the emitter in the center, but I am going to change the emitter type from point to box. Make the box in X about 1500, and the Z about 250. Just give it a little bit of depth, and that should be good in the emitter for right now. We're going to twirl that up, come back to particle. I'm going to change the particle type from sphere to sprite. And sprite gives us options to add in a texture, and then it's time sampling options. But we're going to start by grabbing in our footage folder here this iStock video clip, which I'm going to add the clip, not that pre-comp that I use in the other. Add that into a new composition. I'm going to rename it so that I don't get confused as the fire texture. Okay. We're going to come back into the main start, actually right here in this texture composition. And if we look at this, it's a 24-second long composition of this fireball that was shot, you know, on some 1,000 frame a second camera or whatnot that I got from iStock. But our composition is only 4 seconds long, and the flame on is just really short. So we need to time stretch to make this short enough to be usable. So we want to take the slow motion footage and get rid of the slow-mo, and we're just going to change it to 4 seconds. I'm going to put the current time indicator at the out point, hit the letter N to trim the to make the work area shorter, and I'm going to trim the comp to work area. So now we have a 4-second clip that flames on and goes away, and it all happens in about 4 seconds. So I'm going to come back to main start and back to our particle effects control panel. So we changed it to sprite. We're going to change the texture to, we have to put the texture into the comp. I'm slacking here on this one, excuse me. But we're going to add that in there. We're going to grab the fire particle layer again, and we're going to add the texture as the fire texture. We're going to change this time sampling, which is really, really interesting. We can change it to do random play once, which means at any random point in this texture's fire timeline, it'll choose a point and play to the end. And every single individual particle will choose a different time to play and play to the finish. So if we zoom in, you can see we've got some particles going on here, but they're really tiny. So let's go ahead and crank the size up to 200, I believe is where we were at. That looks pretty good. I'll go to 250. So you can see we have a problem here. Because the fire texture has a black background, each of these individual textures are overlapping each other and not really interacting very well. But we can change the transfer mode right here to add screen or lighten to let them interact with each other a little better. And this is individual. This is not on the layer mode, which the layer mode also will need to go to lighten so that it interacts with the background and the floor. But you can see as we look at this, we have a little bit of a problem because the fire texture, the flame goes beyond the outside edges of the frame. So the best solution would have been to get a video clip that did not go outside of the frame of the camera, but I could not find a good one, so we went with this one. So I'm going to grab an ellipse tool and make a mask. And I'm going to, in the mask settings here, I'm going to make the mask expansion -5, and I'm going to feather the mask by about 10 pixels. And so that will give us a smooth transition on the outside edges all the way around. And you see that smooth things up, makes it look a little better. You can do any of these add modes, but I think add is a little too much. Screen is also a little too much, or screen is a little too much, but lighten is not enough, and it looks really odd. So we're going to use screen. It's like right in the middle, and to make up for all the probably too high intensity of highlights here, I'm going to lower the opacity to around 80. Maybe 75 looks a little better. Okay, this is just kind of salting to taste. And so now we have some pretty realistic looking flames, but there are still a couple small problems. All the textures are facing the same way. So I need to find the rotation drop down here. And I'm going to change random rotation to 100. Flip that up. I'm going to change size random to 100. so that they aren't all the same size, and I'm going to turn this back to 225. Okay. Size over life, I do want them to grow in size, but I don't want them to shrink in size. So I'm going to use this little preset thing right here that draws an in and out, and then I'm just going to draw the out so that it doesn't shrink at the end, but it does come in. Opacity over life, I also want that to go in and out because it's going to choose a random point in time to start and then play to the end. Alright, so that's pretty much it for setting up the particle. Now we just need to make the animate the particles per second, and we'll have it figured out. So I want at about 10 frames for this flame to just be full blown, just flaming crazy, right? But I also want the point to be in the middle, off by about, well, 128 is a little too much. We'll go to 100. Negative 100. And then at 10 frames, I want 1,400 of these particles just going nuts. But I also want them to disappear on frame 11. So frame 10, we've got 1,400 of them. Frame 11, we've got 0. So let's solo that layer and do a little quick RAM preview and see how that looks. That looks pretty good. Flames on, really intense, and disappears. I like that. And you can see, because we started with a real video texture, that we have good looking particles. Now we could have tried to do this with some other, using particles and individual particles or form or something like that to create fire. But if you can use a real texture to create anything, whether it's the text effect that we did before or the floor, real textures, real life textures are always going to look better. So we've got the fire particles. So let's create those sparks that drop down. So I'm going to unsolo this layer, and I'm going to move it up just a little bit further. So I don't want it to quite interact that much with the text, as I didn't do a Z depth pass to really make these interact correctly in 3D space. They're only interacting in their stacking order in After Effects. So let's create another new solid, and we're going to call this one Bouncing Particles. Comp size, all that rest is right. So we're going to again double click particle on there, or particular on there. We're going to, I'll leave this down for just a second, but we're going to solo the layer. The video capture and After Effects are slowing down my video card a little bit. So we'll solo that out for right now. We're going to change the emitter to a box emitter, and we're going to make its size about 1,500 pixels wide. I'm in a 1280 by 720 comp. I'm going to make the Y dimension just a little bit bigger, about 100, and then this size Z, I want to make this about 1,000. Then I'm going to also move the position a little closer to the camera. You can see that the particles start to come over the camera, top of the camera there, and that way they will interact with like being right up on top of the camera as they fall. Okay. I'm going to twirl that up. I'm going to grab the particle. We're going to leave it as a sphere, but I'm going to make the sphere feather a little less, maybe about 25. Size right here needs to come down to around 2. We might do like 2.5 at the end, but I'm going to leave it up at 5 for right now. I'm going to set color over life, so that way it'll start as a different color and end as a different color. So the color over life, I'm going to choose this green just because it's 2 colors. And I'm going to add orange right here, or like a bright yellowy orange. Let's come a little down a little bit further. There we go. And it's depth color. Double click here, and add this in at still bright but darker, or more red here. Something like that. Let's add the fire particles in there so we can see what colors look like. These are still a little too bright. Let's make them a little more orange. There we go. The death, let's make that a little bit more red. And those are pretty close. Okay. Get rid of the fire for right now. These needed to be turned way down though. We'll go down to 2. And if you can't see them, you just have to trust me that that's how it looks good. I want a little bit of opacity random, 25, size random to a 50, and that should be good. Alright, so the particle's good. We could probably spend more time making it look better, but I really just want to focus on the physics. And particular gives you 2 different kinds of physics. You have air physics and bounce physics, and you can't use those together. So I'm going to add a little bit of gravity, about 40, and that's going to make the particles fall faster. So you can see if we do a little quick RAM preview here, you can tell that they're falling a little bit. But we also have the emitter down low, so it's right here. So if we put it out of the scene, it'll look better. We're going to keep it in the scene for right now. I'm going to make it a little bit higher to maybe 60. And in the bounce, we're going to twirl that down, and we're going to use the floor as this background texture, which is my floor. And that means that, let's do a little quick RAM preview. The particles fall and hit my floor, and they bounce. So I can tell I still need a little more gravity. Let's go up to 100. And the bounce is a little too intense, so these bounce too high. So let's make them a little less intense, and make the slide amount a little less as well. Maybe 50. Let's grab the emitter, pull it out of the scene, up right there, and hit 0 to RAM preview. And let's see how that looks. And that looks pretty good. I like that. I am going to put the emitter out of the scene just a little further, which maybe I didn't even get it out of the scene because my video card had a little hiccup. And one last RAM preview just to double check. Frame 10 is when the flames come on. So when the flames are at full power, let's see, just about to get there, maybe right here. They're pretty much flaming, big flame ball, right? Let's go ahead and right at this point, animate the bouncing particles in from 0. Go down a frame and make it 500, and go down 10 frames or 20 frames, go to 0. Let's take a look at that. Alright, that is close to what I want, but it's too, I didn't match up the timing very well. Let's try this. Video card hiccup. So I've noticed while doing some particular stuff that something in CS6 has made it so that the RAM preview gets like stuck. So I need to come into Edit, Purge, All Memory. Hopefully this will, there we go, that did it. Let's RAM preview again and see that that worked. Yes, it did. Okay. So let's add the fire back in. Let's see how that worked together. It's still a little glitchy, but I think it's right. And for whatever reason, I it gets stuck in memory and I can't get it to come out, but I think it's ending up okay. And on the final render, it will forget whatever was stuck in its memory and work. So, all right, so that's our bouncing particles. Let's create one more solid layer, and we're going to call this one drifting part. Okay, and we're going to again add particular, change the emitter to a box emitter, big, 1500 by 1000. And I want this one way up in the camera's grill, like right there. Looks pretty nice. Okay, twirl that up, come into the particle. I'm gonna make this one a cloudlet, as it adds just a little bit more information. You know, they're like little bitty, I don't know, cloudlets. I don't know how else to explain that. We're gonna make this size a lot smaller. 2, probably needs to be 1.5. Maybe even smaller than that. But I'll leave it big for this demonstration. So we're going to set the color over life again, and we're going to choose the color over life right here. Using that same technique, go into this one, double click it, grab me an orange. Sorry for that, new mouse. I push a button and it pops up like that. And then this one, I want it to be pretty red. Alright, let's compare that to our flame again. I think we're pretty close in family colors here. Solo this back out so it's all by itself. Opacity random to 20. Size random to 50, and that should be good. Twirl that up, go back into physics. So last time we did bounce, we're going to stick with air. We're going to add gravity to about the same amount, 100. Grab this guy, pull it way up. There we go. And do a quick run preview. And that is pretty close to what we're going for. But we can come into the air twirl down here, and we can add air resistance, which is like adding viscosity to the air, where the objects won't flow through it as easily. We can add spin amplitude and wind. So I'm going to add some spin amplitude to about 30. Let's see what that looks like. See how they're moving around a little bit more. Let's make it 60, double that up. Spin frequency, we'll spin that up. We just want to add some real interesting, unique movements as they kind of drift. There we go, that looks pretty nice. And then I'm going to add a little bit of wind so that they come in and they kind of float across. And I want to add it a little bit toward the camera. I'm going to call that good. So let's unsolo that and see how the whole comp looks together. I mentioned maybe in the beginning that all of these effects render pretty quickly when they're by themselves, but when you put them all together, it does create a lot of work for your video card, meaning rendering things out might take a little bit of time. And then I also forgot to change those cloudlets to render so that they would flame on and flame off for the rest, so it was a little bit too intense there. So a couple other thoughts in the last 2 minutes of this tutorial. I'm going to rush through. I'm going to come into the final comp that you saw out, the render out at the beginning. We're going to talk about a couple ideas that will help you composite this with the rest of your scene. The first is that I have a light intensity slider. So as the flames here get big, this slider has a few keyframes on it where it goes from 100 to 150 or 200 and then comes back to 100. And these are joined with an expression to these lights. Each one of the lights has an expression on it that links the slider to their intensity, so that in one place we can increase the intensity of the lights, which helps them, turn a little bit high. These highlights come on and they kind of burn, get too hot right there. And because the lights are so intense, it also affects the background, which has an adjustment layer using Star Glow and Shine to create this kind of movement-like effect on the background. And we also added a layer of turbulent displace, so that as these flames move, we get a little bit of displacement and kind of like what you'd expect from a flame in your face. So there it is in less than 30 minutes. I'm Brad Magnus. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I'll see you next time.